Hi, Hunter W here. This is a video I've been meaning to make for a while as I release my third studio album After the Apocalypse in February of this year. So, just the last 5 months I've been overwhelmed, just busy with, a multitude of different things. So, I've finally been able to sit down and kind of describe the concept behind the album. So basically the album is comprised of 9 separate original songs. These songs being Black Cloud, Wade Through the River, Clinging to Life, Take the Hits, High Seas, Trudging On, Will to Live, Leaving the Desert, and The Road. And there's a backstory that I envision coincides with listening to these tracks all the way through. And basically that story it's a post-apocalyptic tale, if you couldn't tell from the album title, obviously. And it's the idea behind it is I remember hearing this theory, I believe it's from Albert Einstein, of sometime in the future when we have the technology to travel to basically other stars, hundreds, thousands of light years away, that when that technology is possible and we send, say, a person to another star, then they'll perceive the journey as, say it takes, say they're traveling at light speed and it's 30 light years away, say it takes them 30 years, then they'll perceive it as 30 years, their body will age accordingly, but they will return to Earth, and the time on Earth will actually go by faster, so they'll return 30 years from then, but Earth will have aged 100 or thousands of years potentially when they return. So in terms of how the tracks coincide with this story is that basically the album starts out with track 1, which is called Black Cloud, and the story doesn't officially kick off with this, but some description behind the track is that it's kind of got like this eerie, dissonant feel. It's basically a guitar instrumental that sets the mood for the rest of the album. I created it with basically, I started with like this percussive kind of palm muted track, and then layered all these harmonies, counterpoint, melodies, stuff like that over that, and the end result is this it kind of symbolizes like this cloud of like negative, that could be interpreted as like a negative mental state approaching. It's kind of like the vibe I got after listening to that. And then the story kicks off with track 2, which is Wade Through the River, it's called. And the story starts with the man has traveled to this new planet, and he's wading through a literal river on this new planetary landscape, and he's experiencing the harsh planetary conditions, obviously that he's not used to on Earth, and he's finding his way back to the spaceship to return back home. And musically, the song has a dark feel with kind of some like an exotic sounding vibe to it as well, because I used some Middle Eastern scales. Guitar players would know these as like the double harmonic scale, and I used some Phrygian in there as well. And like the double harmonic scale is one that it was used in the song Miserlou off Guitar Hero. Some people might recognize the vibe from there. And yeah, musically it builds tension with that those use of scales, and which kind of relates to the story. It represents like the building stress of life contributing to this man's negative mental state on this planet. Clinging to Life is the third track. How this ties into the story is that the man has now traveled back through space and crashed back onto Earth, and he's basically shipwrecked on a remote island after his craft has crashed. He's found himself in a post-apocalyptic world without an explanation and is barely alive. And the music kind of reflects this. Like, the song is dissonant, extensive use of tritones, which musical technique is also associated with building tension. It represents clinging to internal reasons to continue living when external ones seem to be absent. Now, High Seas is track 5. In this one, the story continues. A man, he's currently shipwrecked on this island. He builds a boat and he proceeds to escape the island, kind of Castaway style. I'm sure many of you have seen that movie. And he proceeds to experience, like the harsh ocean that's awaiting him, and hence the title High Seas. Musically, the song contrasts between like groovy, heavy riffs with a clean guitar part, like acoustic, specifically acoustic, opposed to, some of the clean electrics that, my fans have heard on the first couple albums. So yeah, it's kind of got like a bipolar feel between intense parts and, more minimalistic acoustic parts. And in a way, it's kind of a metaphor for sailing through uncharted waters. You can interpret it as like experiencing unstable mental states, which is also, how someone might perceive this man in this, context of the story. Track 6 is Trudging On, and this next part of the story, the man eventually navigates to the mainland, but he finds it to be like a desolate landscape of ghost towns and cities, radioactive fallout. If any of you have played that game, Fallout, Fallout 2, Fallout 3, etc., you know what I'm talking about. He travels through the desolate world in search of a better place. And musically, the song is very heavy, has like a dark, slow, brooding kind of feel. And like the title track, it represents trudging on through life, despite it appearing that there's little hope of things improving. Track 7 is Will to Live, where in the story the man begins further struggling and questioning his will to survive and to continue living in, like this very unpromising, unforgiving world. And musically, the song is very sludgy, heavy, kind of cliche descriptions, but it's, but yeah, it also has like groove and time shifts. It's a bit more progressive in that nature, and it represents a pursuit of finding a reason for one's existence and becoming in touch with one's like primal survival instinct. Track 8 is Leaving the Desert. It's the longest song on this album and definitely took the longest time to compose. There's key changes, time changes, just general vibe, feeling changes, and I'm pretty proud of how this one came out musically. Although I have to say I was pretty dissatisfied with the production, the final result, and hope to release a remixed, remastered version as a single eventually. But in this story, the man eventually makes his way past the desolate ghost towns and cities and finds himself in like a radioactive post-apocalyptic desert. And so he goes through a whole new journey, through changing landscapes, and which are kind of represented musically with like the changing musical keys, tempo shifts, time changes, stuff like that. He goes through all that stuff, and eventually he finds his way out of the desert, hence the song title. And he makes his way out of this literal wasteland to a more promising landscape. It could also be viewed as a metaphor for recovering from like a prolonged negative mental state, whether it's depression, anxiety, substance abuse. I feel like a lot of people could basically relate that story to their own personal struggles. And the closer of the album is called The Road. It's actually the first song I've done that's completely absent of drums. It's just a guitar and bass instrumental, basically. And my first use of slide guitar on this album, which I was pretty inexperienced in. I was kind of teaching myself how to play slide guitar as I was recording it, and that is something I do want to continue to experiment with in the future. But basically, the story ends with the man finds an unknown road at the end of the desert and decides to take his path wherever this road may lead him. And I guess the general story is kind of inspired slightly by the movie The Road, especially, the title I used for that track. And the song is, I guess stylistically, it's kind of reminiscent of like Delta blues style music as well, which is, an example of me kind of broadening the experimentation, what influence I wanted to incorporate into the material for this record. And yeah, it's basically a metaphor for the uncertain part of recovery from whether it's mental illness, addiction, etc., or any change in the direction of one's life. I feel like is the most accurate interpretation that many people would find for this story. And yeah, basically that is the album's concept in a nutshell. You can check it out in the link below. It's on iTunes, Spotify, other platforms including Rhapsody, eMusic, Amazon MP3, Google Play, etc. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoy, and I hope this was, an interesting explanation of the concept behind this album. Thank you.